lineage within creating, and I think you kind of can each answer it as, you know, we're working across artist and collector, and I'm not gonna answer it, but this idea that technique, sensibility, and notions of value are kind of intrinsic to both of those practices, right? This idea of like, what do you want to collect, why you're collecting, what does value look like for you within a piece of work, and then you both have studio practices, and you're obviously creating both textile and painting, and I wonder if we can talk about the sort of sensibility within that lineage for you.
I mean, for me, my practice is about my lineage, it is about my family, it is about the things that I've learned and trying to represent that kind of like timeline. And so I grew up in a rural area, but had to move to the city because my father, a lot of our parents were migrating for better jobs in the city, in Johannesburg. And I guess growing up in the city, there's a lot of those traditions that like I've lost. And so part of my practice is really trying to like reconnect with that, reconnect to like my lineage, reconnect to the things that I come from that I think, because things are moving so fast and cities are like rising so fast, there is a disconnect, but also in my own way, in a way that preserves a thing for like my children that also represents me and where I'm at currently. So yes, I'm gonna answer that question.
I think for me it's a lot of artists from the American South. It is Aaron Douglas. There are a lot of folks specifically from a rural context who I'm looking to, but then there's someone like Faith Ringgold, the unnamed artist who made quilts. She's been quilters. A lot of folks from a specifically textile background. Folks who make in a maybe quote unquote vernacular way, someone like Al Loving. And being in LA, I think there are all these ways that I have found artists who I greatly admire. Spent a lot of time here in their formative years, and I think about someone like Sangan Nkudi or Carrie James Marshall. Yeah, there are all these ways that I think place, geography, impact those folks' work, and subsequently.
As a collector, the historical context of the stories that I'm a custodian of, right? So it's my job as a collector to essentially be a good steward of the works that artists are telling. And it's interesting because we were having a conversation last night about like historical context, artists. I mean, you know, sometimes you see an artist and maybe it looks sometimes a bit too derivative, right? So how do we decipher which artists we collect? And when I think about my collection philosophy, which I've actually in writing been working on, I think what I'm trying to figure out as a collector, and this is going to be a lifelong journey for me, is how do I find artists that are adding to the historical conversation, that still have their unique voice, and are like pushing the story, the narrative, pushing their practices in ways that resonate with me. And you know, how can I then, as a steward, make sure that they get the support that they need? So I think, you know, like when I think about my collection, I think of, you know, I'm mostly paintings, I have some textile work, but I'm really looking for, as a collector, artists that are taking those that came before them and adding their own language, adding their own story to that. And for me, it is important to reference and pay homage to those artists that came ahead of them. And my job is just to make sure that I support those artists in ways that, you know, either collecting, I also gift, I donate to institutions, I loan out to institutions. In fact, there's a curator here from Moad who's got a work that I have on loan, somewhere in here. So those are the ways that I try to both collect as a philosophy, artists that are adding to the conversation, those that came before them, but also make sure that in a broader context, I'm supporting them in ways that are outside of just hoarding work. You know, sometimes work just disappears in a home forever, you never get to see it again. which, for some collectors, that's cool too. Just not really my strategy.
Within the frame of whatever composition you're particularly interested in?
I think like most new collectors, when I dove